It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 489. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
That's a big number.
Grace.
Hello.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hey there.
It's been a week, y'all. It's been a week. But we are taking a break from our Dawntrail spoiler show because ammo's out this week. And since we record these, as multiple sessions, we could do that now.
Yay. Not making the mistake of a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah, I can't do that
Hooray.
anymore. I am too old.
It was a mistake.
It was a huge mistake.
You would think doing this for 10 years we would have learned something, and I guess that's what we've learned.
That is the thing we've learned. Anyway, so we've got a bunch of topics. One of these has bounced around a lot, and I am very curious to get to that, but we've got a couple before that. This week, the Diablo IV Season 5 started. And Grace, you've been playing. How is it so far?
It's pretty solid. I'm sure that it's probably not competing well with Path of Exile right now, but it is at least as good as Season 4, and Season 4 was pretty good. There's not that much different from Season 4. There's a few things. So in typical Blizzard fashion, some things have swung in different directions. But there's a reasonable amount of stuff to do. There's a new season mechanic that is a pretty reasonable way to get crafting mats especially if you don't love the pit. And all the things that were good about Season 4 are still pretty good. So I have not quite reached 100 yet, but I'm pretty close. So obviously I haven't put a ton of time, but a reasonable amount. I'm almost 100. And yeah, the season mechanic is a series of waves of things to kill that you make progressively harder to also make more rewarding with your choices. And it's reasonably fun. It's not, the most fun season mechanic, but it's entertaining. It's something else to do. I think it sounds like they're going to be making it part of the main line once the season is over. So I think that's a good thing, just to have, it's rewards pretty decent amounts of gear, but it also can reward crafting mats instead of the pit. So I like it because it means I don't have to just run the pit over and over again. But it does have the issue where it feels very cobbled together mechanically, in that it uses keys the same way that Nightmare Dungeons use keys, and they just accumulate in your bags, and you never have enough room for them because your crafting material bag is already mostly full of crafting materials. And I don't understand why, unless the higher tier ones are more variable, and I just haven't seen it yet, but up through, I think it goes up through 8, and I have seen up through 4. And they're all identical, so I don't understand why I have to carry around a million individual keys that don't stack.
Can you at least salvage them like you can Nightmare Dungeon keys?
Yes. So That's what I've pretty much just been doing. And you can also craft them. So you don't really have to keep them. But when you're, if you're doing Helltide or you're doing, other things, they drop pretty frequently and just clog up your bags. But yeah, I enjoy the mechanic though. It's definitely a great way to level. There's just a million enemies in there, and so tons of XP. I wish that I could level my glyphs in there so I didn't have to do nightmare dungeons, but can't have everything.
Yeah, they seem real determined to not do away with nightmare dungeons.
Yeah, but whatever. They're pretty much unchanged, so they're fine, and you can plow through them to level your glyphs and then never do them again. They did also change world bosses. This is definitely a Blizzard pendulum swing, where in season 4 the world bosses died in about, I don't know, 5 seconds, definitely less than 10. And now they take a couple minutes. It's very slow. And they're not any more challenging necessarily than they were when they took 2 seconds to kill. They just take a long time. I'm not sure it's that great. But I guess, hey, it gives people a chance to actually run up to the boss, even if they're not there a minute early.
How is the state of the game otherwise? Like any big balance shifts or anything like that going on?
I mean, there's been some. My sense is that they've tried to take barbs down a couple of pegs. Not sure if it's fully worked. I definitely still see a lot of barbs around. I'm trying a different class this season just because I haven't tried the sorcerer yet. So I've been running a chain lightning sorcerer, and that has felt pretty decent. My understanding is that my minion necro build from last time around is not that changed this season. So from looking at the patch notes and things, it seems like they just tried to nerf barbs and buff everything else. So it feels fine to me.
I think the problem with the barb design is so like they don't feel amazing while you're leveling them, but then when you get them maximum geared, they are wildly overpowered because they have at least 2 item slots more than any other character has.
I was kind of wondering about that when they
Like-
were announcing that design.
Like it's just they have 4 weapons. All 4 weapons count all the time, not just the ones that you're equipping. All 4 weapons count, no matter if you're swapping back and forth between them. So they just have 2 extra gear slots that everyone else doesn't have.
That just seems like an obvious balance issue.
Yeah. Like there's no way to like you can make the barbs feel bad so that people won't play them, but also like they're always going to be superior because they have more stat sticks than everyone else does in a game where stat sticks really matter.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I've heard that the state of items, especially unique items, has gotten significantly better this season.
Yes, that is definitely true. So the state of items, regular items, got significantly better last season, but they didn't really make a lot of changes to uniques then, and they did this time around. And so it's definitely like I'm using one in my build, and it doesn't feel like I'm hindering myself by not being able to temper things. So yeah, it's definitely better.
That's good. Uniques are fun.
Yeah. And there's still the same sort of reputation system that they had last season. It's not the Iron Wolves again, it's somebody different, but same mechanic. And what's nice there is I have finished, I didn't even realize this until today, but I've finished the, all of the reputation rewards. And it turns out this season that they've got just a continual one. So I was surprised I kept seeing the Mother's Gift, the thing that raises your reputation. I kept seeing it dropping after I had grabbed all the rewards and was confused. And turns out you can just keep getting a loot box every so often for your reputation. So that feels good.
Yeah, that's much better. I do like that they're starting to look at introducing more evergreen systems because, like, that was kind of the problem with the first couple of seasons where they would add something and it would help, but then it was immediately gone with nothing actually sticking around. So, like, I think like they seem to be on the right path. Other than some of the pendulum swinging, which is just inherent with a Blizzard game, but also that they've maybe got a pretty good base post season 4 to start adding things that are just going to start expanding the base of the game.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the state of the game right now, and so it's a really good baseline for the expansion that's coming out this fall. I think we'll see exactly where they go with that, but the game is in a pretty decent place for them to build on, which I think is good, and which is somewhat unique compared to Diablo 3. They did not get the benefit of a solid base game to build an expansion on. So they're ahead as far as I'm concerned. It is at this point giving me what I want out of a Diablo game. I can challenge myself if I want to, but unlike some other ARPGs, I don't have to constantly push to feel like I'm getting anything. I can do very chill activities and still get rewarded. And then I can push myself when I'm, feeling in the mood for it. So I'm actually pretty happy with it right now.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would ding them on is between season 4 and now season 5. They've not really done anything that's terribly imaginative. Like it's the mechanics that they introduced with 4 and the mechanics that they introduced with 5 are kind of very safe things.
Yes. And I mean, of the popular ARPGs that I've been playing lately, Diablo 4 is the least interesting by far. The skill system is not that interesting. Like you said, a lot of the systems that they put in feel very safe, but it's extremely solid right now. It's extremely polished, and it feels good to play. So yeah, it's not as interesting and imaginative as Last Epoch or what Path of Exile is doing, but it's it's solid.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that once things stabilize for that team, that they'll start branching out and doing some more interesting things. Because at the very end of Diablo 3, they implemented a bunch of really interesting systems that are now kind of evergreen in with every expansion, or every season. So I'm kind of hoping that we start to see some of those things working their way in. So thing that happened last week and why Kodra wasn't here, GenCon.
Yay, GenCon. So GenCon was in Indianapolis yet again. And it was sold out before the convention even opened, which is the first time I can remember that happening. Although I've heard that maybe I wasn't paying attention to this and it happened during the 50th anniversary. Either way, it was a pretty packed convention. I have fun pictures of us like taking over Lucas Oil Stadium, and like they put like like 1-inch cover over top the entire field, but like basically the entire place where the Colts play, that's where we were playing games.
What was it in Lucas Oil Stadium previously?
For the past couple of years, I mean, it's in the Indianapolis Convention Center. And as we have required more space for stuff, we have continued to subsume the neighboring areas. The ICC actually has a direct connection to Lucas Oil Stadium, so it's easy to just like walk from there into the stadium.
Okay, so like it's not like the entire thing was in the stadium.
No. The stadium would be much too small to hold GenCon.
That's just staggering to think about.
It big. Yeah, like it's really hard to put into words how big the exhibit hall feels. Like it was huge. We the one of the first things I did was a run of True Dungeon, Crimson Isle. I think I've mentioned in the past, True Dungeon is sort of a like really before escape rooms were big, they were like trying to come up with escape room style puzzles in these dungeon rooms. You have 12 minutes per room. You're either going to be solving some sort of puzzle or you're going to be fighting a monster. There is an entire gear thing going on with this where you like
Isn't your character persistent between all of the True Dungeon events?
Your character, I mean, your gear is persistent. So like you will get gear tokens and then you equip gear to your character. And like there are all of these different characters, but the characters themselves are largely static.
Okay.
Asterisk, like there is a level 5 there's a level 4 version of each character and a level 5 version of each character, and there are certain items that have on them +1 character level. You also have, like, for as many True Dungeons as you run, you level up like a perk system. So I know some people have like perks that allow them to have bonus treasure pools. Because of course, the thing you do at the end of a run is you get to like pull a certain number of treasures, and there are items that increase how many treasures you pull.
Gear for magic.
And some of those treasures are the monster bits, and the monster bits allow you to interact with the crafting system, which allows you to spend the gold that comes on items to craft rare new items. I do not know how any of this works. We have a porter. He knows how all of this works. He manages crafting gear for our characters. And then he brings like all of the tokens and lets us know like what our stats are.
There's a whole subculture here where you kind of get into a True Dungeon clique and you keep everybody pools all of their tokens from all of the events that they do, because you can't actually do the higher difficult. If you just like start, you can't like progress through the higher difficulty stuff because you won't have enough loot. You need to be like an aficionado.
And I gotta say, like, we are like at the very top end of the first, like the entry level difficulty. And like, if we had tried to do the next level up, we were running light. So there are supposed to be 10 people playing in a run. We had 9 in one and 8 in the other. We would have definitely lost both of those runs if we had tried it on the next tier up. And we're like, the answer is we're not investing that much into True Dungeon other than the tokens we get from like doing a single run. There are people who buy like booster boxes of tokens for thousands of dollars to get the really good stuffs, or the people who are volunteering and get a lot of good stuff from there. But yes, it's a wild subculture, which I am like ancillarily related to. But it was fun. We survived. My character probably was contributed more damage because I was the bard. And Bard Song is very powerful when you have 9 people in a party. There are like True Dungeon. we apparently got into True Dungeon right at the start of it. It has exploded. It's getting to be a little bit like the price of a True Dungeon run is definitely higher than is necessarily comfortable. Like it was always a very premium event, but it's gone from like being a $40 event to being like an $110 event.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's a big buy-in.
It's a
Especially
big
when you
buy-in.
usually need to already be at a convention to do it.
Yes.
Well, and especially if you want to, like, especially with all of the collecting that is sort of necessary to go, like you were talking about, you're at the top end of the beginner tier,
Mm-hmm.
and you've been in since the start.
I know, right? Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, we're sort of the casual. We're the old school casual group. Yes, I am aware of the gatekeeping level that there can be. Although I know that like usually, if you're just a beginner group, it usually they try and go a little easy on you because they don't want you to just lose early on.
No, because they want you to keep paying for
Yeah.
the fees.
They
Because
want
then
you
you
to
might
have a
just
good
decide
time.
this sucks. I'm not gonna do it again.
I
And
will
then they don't get
say-
your money.
First hit's free.
I'm trying to remember. I think my favorite was a puzzle that was very much like a puzzle about I like the physical puzzles. So this was a puzzle where you had to like you had to get a pair of eggs like suspended over a fire pit. And so they were like large physical eggs, and you had these like bamboo sticks that you were weaving together into like a pseudo net and then putting the eggs on top of it. It was a lot of fun.
It's like some Odyssey of the Mind stuff here.
Yeah, a little bit.
there's a really interesting thing. I've only done it once, but it's a really interesting thing for it where it's like if you have a really good escape room like business in your town that happens to be themed properly, I feel like you might just be like, I don't necessarily get the appeal of True Dungeon, except that True Dungeon travels. So the fact that they have like these pretty elaborate setups in a traveling format is really impressive.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of that adventure. Like there are stories that span multiple arcs, and so like you want to see the full story as you go through.
So are like multiple modules per se being run at the same time?
Oh yeah, like I think they had 4 modules running at GenCon.
Yeah, it's very much it's very like if you've been to like a really nice escape room business, it's sort of a very similar structure where they'll have like
4 rooms or so going at the same time, and you can choose which one you
Yeah.
want to go through. Yeah.
like so then the fancier buildings will have like it'll be like a building with 10 rooms, and it'll be like 3 3 4 where they'll be running 2 like individual stories in the 3s and then the sequel story in the 4, and this is very similar.
Yeah, so, and the structure here is each adventure has 7 rooms into it, except for there are like shorter ones that have less, but most of their mainline adventures have 7 rooms, and you have 12 minutes per room, and all of those rooms are always firing all of the time. So like you've got along the path 7 different parties, each in their own room getting like moved along.
Yeah.
And then of course there's cool stuff like this time they had a big like animatronic swamp monster that you quote unquote fight. Fighting is with shuffleboard, like you have tokens. Like the item token, you slide it along a board, and that like you're trying to land it in all of the monster's silhouette is like carved up into a bunch of zones. And those zones all have numbers, and those represent the number you would roll on a d20. So you're like trying to aim for the 20 to get your crits in. Meanwhile, like spellcasters are doing these like mental tests. There's a layout that's like, here are all of the planes of power. You're allowed to you spend the first half of the first 12 minutes of the adventure in a training room, which is where you get to memorize all of those, and then the DM will ask you to point one out, and if you point it out, your spell is more effective.
I remember having to memorize leaves for this as a druid.
Yeah, you had to memorize leaves as a druid. You have to memorize prayer beads as a cleric, and you have to memorize runes as a bard. But yeah, it was fun. It was True Dungeon. I feel like if I'm stepping back, I think True Dungeon's better days are in its past at this point. None of the puzzles really wowed me with the technology they were bringing to bear, which there were definitely some older puzzles that did, or with the creativity on display.
Yeah, I bet they're running into kind of the limitations of being a traveling show.
Yeah,
Very likely.
So some things probably don't work extremely well in scale.
There's also they're getting competition from other escape room type things that are traveling around. They're not the only game in town anymore.
Mm-hmm. So I'm actually curious about this. Are there others that are doing the combat side of it?
I have no idea. Not so much on that, I don't think.
Sort of unique to True Dungeon, where there are both puzzle rooms and combat rooms.
So there's an escape room. I hesitate to call it a chain, but there's 3 of them. That's very 007, the Bourne Identity themed. That does dark guns and stuff as their combat, and has basically Bond movie themed rooms to work through. I have only done it once, years ago, but yeah, I mean, it's also just it's a static brick and mortar establishment, which has its positives and negatives. So I imagine there's others that are doing something similar.
Yep.
I was thinking of it's not called Fuzzy Logic anymore because they had to change the name. I think it's just called literally Furry Logic now. That goes to most furry conventions and do an escape room thing, but there's no combat element to that.
Anytime somebody talks about True Dungeon, it reminds me of Photon, which probably makes no sense to anyone who did not live through Photon being a thing. But it was a laser tag franchise, but you had a persistent character, and you had, rankings and scorings, I would say nationally, but realistically it was just in the Southwest that Photon really was a thing.
Oh, interesting. We had, I remember there were laser tag places that did it at a store level. Like that.
Yeah, this was there were all around the Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, Arkansas area, maybe Florida. There were Photon arenas, and they were all linked together, and they're all connected to a same computer system. So when you went the first time, you got a badge and you set your call sign, and then from that point on, you were that person in every single Photon arena. And there were all these bonus objectives that happened down in the maze that you could find stuff, and it would give you additional points, and it was wild.
I know that
it was really expensive too, so I didn't get to go there that often, but
yeah. I know that as of 2 or 3 years ago, Disney was poaching escape room people left and right, Disney parks. And I have no idea where, if anywhere, that went, but...
I mean, they had things like the Star Wars Hotel.
Yeah.
For whatever that's worth.
Yeah, that one... And I have watched the 4-hour video on that.
Yes, I have!
Yes.
It's pretty great!
And honestly, that doesn't sound too far away from, what True Dungeon... honestly, True Dungeon's more systematized than what that sounded like. But yes. Let's see. I then had to... Thursday was a heck of a day. I may have overscheduled myself. I went from True Dungeon. I think I had an hour break to run and get changed for my next LARP, which was Council of Soapcalia, which was sort of a This is by the Feldra Gaming Company. They are a group of folks who are at least tangentially related to Level 99 in that they worked on the Guilty Gear Strive product that is definitely not Exceed.
Don't they even call it Exceed compatible?
I don't know if they call it. They might call it Exceed compatible. They just don't want you to
But
think
they don't say Exceed anywhere on the box. No.
Yeah, that they might say it's using the Exceed engine.
Oh, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is a group of this is a crew of LARPers that run what I'm going to say are pretty like rules heavy LARPs, which is not, it's kind of unusual for LARPs. Like usually you are a character, there's a very stripped down system because like the more you are like going to rules or requiring GMs to adjudicate, the less you're actually like in the moment and doing LARPs. But they have a lot of rules that they have a lot of like you usually have a lot of social powers. Like my character was sort of like a villain of the group. We were and like I thought all of these humans were beneath me, but they had this cool technology that I couldn't possibly understand. And my goal was to figure out how to take that cool technology, understand how it works, and bring it back so that we could fully utilize it for our evil, nefarious schemes.
And what was the technology?
Well, so the technology was these batteries, which, spoilers, halfway through we found out was just like fire elementals that had been like dead fire elementals that had been like trapped in the rocks that the Sobkalians were mining, and that's why it was able to like do all of this wondrous Magitech stuff. But there's a problem with that, which is that what happens when the batteries wake up? A lot of fire elementals start pouring out. Oops. So there was one character who discovered like an alternative way for to create these batteries was now with like the quote willingly donated blood of the people who had previously been like harvesting the fire elementals. So my character decided to like be very helpful to everyone and take refugees off of this island that was burning down. And you know, we'll figure out how to put them to good use. I also had a power. So my character was a immortal bunny person, but everyone knew that if you saw the bunny ears, that's a bad person. Like, I'm an elf. I have big ears. These big ears are bunny ears. But still, everyone knows elves are no good, and so I had to wear a giant hat so no one knew I had giant ears. This one was fairly fun. I don't love being the like overt villain usually. I usually have a more fun like doing other stuff. And I did a second game with them, which was an absolute blast because it was set in, it was called, I'm going to try and pronounce this. Swing. It's spelled Smaioinigh. But it's Gaelic, so I was told Sweeney.
You got whatever you say.
I'll believe it. Whatever.
It's Gaelic, so I'm out.
Yep.
Anyways, this was a game set in a Fey court. Most of the Fey there were unseelie. This was the one time of the year, like when it was, I think at like an equinox where the seelie and unseelie could get together and like discuss things. And mostly it was the unseelie holding court. And I was the mortal there who was dreaming all of this up. None of this was real. This was all my dream. I had the power of lucid dreaming.
Yeah, but who's to say, like, dreams aren't all real?
Well, boy, they definitely thought that these dreams were real. But I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is the world that I dream. The problem was some of the people in my dreams were talking about the world that I came from, which was a world ravaged by late-stage capitalism, where everyone was just waiting to die. A world of misery and fire that, rightly, I was trying to figure out how I could dream as much as possible to escape. And so my big thing was to make sure that nobody brought my real world into their dreamland, and also make sure that the good guys won. I had a bunch of hilarious powers, like I could become third-person omniscient, in which let me like wander around the room with a mask on, and like if anyone asked, I would just say, I am literally not here and I'm allowed to listen into whatever you're saying. I could listen into what the GMs were talking about even. I had a power that let me just ask the GMs questions. I had powers that allowed me to like constantly alter reality. And it was very funny when one character who was specifically anti-magic tried to use that fact against me to discover that I was 100% non-magical, despite all of the weird...
magic.
It's not magic. I'm just dreaming. I'm immortal. I don't know what magic is. I just can change reality at my will. There was another character there who she had like probably a 1 to 2 month old, and the baby was also a character in the LARP. She was a fae, and her story was that she had stolen a baby. Or not stolen. She had received a baby, and she didn't know what to do with it. And so she like started by asking a bunch of people like, hey, you're immortal. What do babies do? What should I know about babies? I was like, shouldn't it be with their mother? It's like, no, this baby is mine. I was given it. That character, the backstory for that character is she was a tulpa and the baby was a dreamer. Specifically, the baby was me, my character, as a baby. And so it got very weird when suddenly she named the baby and suddenly my name changed. Because names are also a big thing in the Fae world too.
Names have power.
Names have power.
So your baby, was there a changeling in the real world in your place?
No, because she said she had taken the baby, but that was a lie. She was a tulpa manifested by the baby. Like, this was such a fun game. It ended off with like everyone got distracted. Like, we were trying to find the MacGuffin to restore the King of the Seelie, and they all got distracted because a wizard had usurped the title of King of the Seelie to try and destroy magic, because he had decided that all magic was like evil and needed to be destroyed. They were dealing with that, and I was like, no, I need to go get the MacGuffin. So I got to fight the Jabberwocky, and my ability to just have something that is useful, I was like, cool, I have the Vorpal sword. So it went very chaotic. I got to say,
did you in fact go Snicker Snack?
I in fact went Snicker Snack, and yeah, it was a cool chaotic LARP, and like I'm thinking like my takeaway is having lots of powers and having people just say, hey, my sheet says I'm able to do this, and like everyone else having sheets that say I'm able to do this, people just roll with it and then don't like, they might like say, oh yeah, like most people just role play with it really well, and I thought that was really cool. The groups of role players were really good in the LARPs I was playing. The other LARPs I did were with Elder Entertainment. They're a little bit more rules light. They're more horror Cthulhu-esque, mythos-esque. And most of them were period pieces. One was specifically, we were in a club room, like we were in a gentleman's club in the 1800s in Britain, and I was a young lord who was like also a person who liked to dabble in magic, which in Cthulhu, that's a bad idea. I had bad ideas, but like this was very Regency Cthulhu, which is apparently getting very popular.
I mean, that makes sense.
And so I ultimately managed to assist in sealing in the monster that the ultimate story was. We were in a gentleman's club called the Vicar's Room, which is not a religious establishment, but is sort of a coy play on that idea. But it was first an old Roman temple that was built on a Celtic temple that was a temple of an old one. And the whole story was the old one was coming back to their temple. And the story was they managed to get back in, but I had an elder sign, and once they got in, I trapped them inside. We did one LARP that was the Walking Blues, and it was set in a late 1930s, like, bar in Louisiana, and like the whole thing was themed around like blues musicians and blues music. My character was a music promoter trying to like find people to like bring back to Chicago to print records with, and it was a fun game. The like ultimate thing was there was somebody who was a killer, and the idea is the killer is somebody chosen by the GMs. Like every single time, any player could be the killer. It's not written into anyone's backstory. And so in our game, the killer like ultimately had a breakdown and confessed, and they sacrificed themselves to quell the spirit of the blues, which was an angel that was seeking justice or revenge, was how they put it.
The Angel of the Blues has given me deep Mighty Boosh thoughts here.
It's a very cool concept. Like there were two other like supernatural beings. One was like the bartender is explicitly like Lucifer, and the bar's normal singer is a spirit of chaos. So the bartender was hilarious. All he was trying to do was to get everyone to like commit sins as much as possible. And so one of the things was he had a shotgun at his bar, and everyone kept asking him for the shotgun. And he was like, "Are you going to go kill someone with it? Sure, here, have a shotgun. That's a sin for sure." But the one of the GMs was the spirit of chaos, and they did an incredible job, like performing multiple music numbers, and it was a lot of fun. Oh, and the final like period piece that I did was early 70s, and the idea was I was the head of a record company that was like producing psychedelic rock music. And my character was like, hey, there are all of these earthquakes happening, and I think these earthquakes are because the serpent people beneath the earth are trying to escape. And this was all, apparently there was like a big earthquake in the 70s in, I think it was Los Angeles, which is where we were. And so like we were just trying to make sure so like, is the world gonna end? And so we had to find the perfect song to sing, which was like to summon a spirit that could protect us to stop the stakes. That's all my character knew. And so I was trying to like find an album, find one of these psychedelic rock numbers that would be the perfect song. And it's very fun to play this type of era in like Mythos, because you can be extremely hippie and trippy, and you can talk so easily in coded languages, where like it was very funny. All of the times I'd be like, hey man, I love this sound. Oh, it really lets you open your third eye and see the land of the dreams. Have you ever seen the land of the dreams, man? And then like the people who had Mythos written in their character was like, Yes, I have in fact seen the Land of the Dreams. I want to hear more about what you're talking about. And the other people just thought you were being a hippie. I think that's actually a problem with a lot of these Mythos games, is it's like hard to, like, you're supposed to be keeping so many secrets. It's hard to have like ways of figuring out who's in the know and who's not. And so like that level of like, hey, there's actually a language that you could use as a code to like figure out who knows what's going on and not, helped really move things along in that game. The final LARP I did was a continuation LARP of the LARP in space. I actually got into full costume. I got a chef's outfit, a butcher's apron, a plastic bloodied cleaver, and a Cthulhu mask. It was an interesting game, I'm going to say, because my character is like just by nature an extremely dark character, and we were in the comic relief side of the story timeline, because the timeline got split in our last game, and so they split it out into 2 times. So I was in kind of like the goofy, like Looney Tunes timeline, but it was fun. Like overall, I had a blast. I really love LARPing at these things. It's like the one time a year I get to do it. I got to have an interesting conversation where I know that this is like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh man, that's a very stereotypical thing for me to do. But like, apparently I should check out like improv, because there's a lot of crossover there, I've been told.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, role-playing in general is improv with dice.
Yes.
LARPing leans even heavier toward the improv
I was
side
about
of
to
it.
say, we don't have any dice in LARPing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a heavy crossover between theater kids and LARPing.
Oh god,
Yeah,
yes.
like
Oh, man.
you're like 2 major groups that get into tabletop RPGs are theater kids and people who really like math for fun.
Well, and I got into it because I'm a kid who liked math for fun.
Yeah, but
But-
there's like the theater kid side that is definitely where you get the LARPs and like all of those 1-pager RPGs
Mhm.
that are like the barest possible bone mechanical
Amber, the
systems.
diceless role-playing game.
Yeah, diceless roleplay.
Amber.
Like all of that is for like, those are for the theater kids. The ones where you can like, as a DM, say like 3 sentences, and the rest of your like entire session, you just sort of sit back and watch because the players themselves will run the rest of it
Mhm.
out of control.
Yes, and there's definitely a lot more of the theater kids LARP going on, and theater kid energy going on in the LARP circles.
Mhm.
It's just I've now gotten a chance to do it more, and it's really fun. Like,
Secret theater kid.
I'm a
like,
secret theater kid.
I was never a theater kid, but I did theater tech. So I was theater kid adjacent, but I was also a very artistic kid and went to art school type things. So like there's a lot of crossover there.
I just ended up hanging out with all the theater kids because I got into Vampire LARP.
I was a band kid, but I was pretty theater adjacent. But I definitely fell on the side of math for fun, not theater kids when it comes to RPGs.
I do think that I have tried to be. I find it's just easier for me to act when I'm standing up and not necessarily thinking about like stats or anything. And
Yeah.
so like
This is a well-known phenomenon. Like all of vampire LARPing is born out of this, basically, like early mid 90s. Because you're like, there's a lot of people who definitely also have that. Like, if I'm thinking about the numbers, I find it hard to get into character.
I find vampire like the other thing is I find I find that with a D&D character, I try and like get a very very thin amount of plot down and then let it happen naturally. And so is that how like I normally have a lot more to go off of in a LARP? where like I have a character sheet that has a decent amount of information, and then there's like I still have to like make some decisions because the character sheet doesn't go fully into everything, and so I just like roll with it. But
I mean, I feel like to a great degree that's a function of like one shot and convention style games where you're playing a pre-made character.
Yeah.
Because like I've had, sit down tabletop, just regular old D&D games at conventions, but all the characters were pre-made characters, and yeah, there was a lot more role play in a lot of cases than you might otherwise see.
Well, you're handed basically like a bunch of puzzle pieces that fit neatly together in the forms of a party. Like everyone is balancing everyone else, and it just works so much better than the freeform chaos of like everyone wanting to do their own thing and needing like, I don't know, half a dozen sessions before anything actually begins to gel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely a certain kind of player who, if you give them a lot of backstory, or like a lot of, it doesn't even have to be backstory. It's more like here's all of the things about your character. It can help people get into character a lot more.
Yeah, just here's a personality quirk this character has.
Yeah.
Here's a minor goal this character has that doesn't really directly impact the story, but still, opportunities will come up for that to rear its head. Things like that.
Here's what motivates us. The other thing that I think is important is so many of the like one-shot characters are seeded with like direct relationships to other characters.
Yes.
Like the fact, and again, this is helpful because of the scale. The fact that I can be in a 30-person LARP and have 5 different character names on this sheet that I'm like, I know this character. So I can like, I'm going to go up and start a conversation and talk about the things that we like collectively share. Like that's a way for me to start this interaction.
Yeah, because you know ahead of time.
And so now you already have like this seeded set of relationships that will start moving a plot forwards.
Yeah, and when you're doing something with a relatively limited amount of time like that, you really do need that. You don't need people standing around for half an hour, trying to get to know each other's characters and figuring out who they can even trust to talk to.
The final event, the event I mentioned with the rock was apparently called Going to California, and I felt bad for the GM because apparently the entire thing was a send up to all of his favorite like rock and roll stars from the early 70s, and nobody there understood any of it, including the title.
That's a shame.
Apparently Going to California is a track on the untitled, well, not untitled, but the symbolically titled Led Zeppelin album, which is also
Led
where...
Zeppelin 4?
What?
The one usually called Led Zeppelin 4?
I believe called Led Zeppelin 4, yes. Which is also where Stairway and Kashmir are from.
Yep.
And the entire plot of the LARP is from like the first verse of Kashmir.
I couldn't tell you what the words to Kashmir are, and I've listened to that song a lot of times.
Yep, that was their comment too. His comment was
kind of vocal smear.
I'm
it's also got Misty Mountain Hop on it, doesn't it?
That and Evermore.
Yeah. Let the sun beat down upon my face. The stars fill my dreams. I'm a traveler of both time and space. To be where I have been. To sit with the elders of the gentle race this world has seldom seen. They talk of days for which they sit and wait. All will be revealed. Anyways, it's a trippy sounding song and definitely feels like very psychedelic and a little bit mythos. Anyways, I also did the vendor hall at GenCon. It was huge. I think I mentioned. I picked up a bunch of games, but I definitely picked up Iconoclash, which is the one that's been played the most at our household so far. And I picked this up. Well, I checked it out on the recommendation of Ashgar. Iconoclash is a Smash Brothers board game.
Oh my.
Not 100% accurate. Like, it's not just about edging people off, but it is
about to ask how much of this game consisted of knocking other people's pieces off the board.
So, as opposed to that being the way you kill them, it's just so you start with 25 health, and if you edge someone off, they lose 2 health. But you also have attacks that are also dealing damage. So it's just an alternative strategy. There's definitely a lot of like throwing your opponents around. There are 2 boxes with 4 characters each. I got the one that has the Conquistador in it. It's a otter dressed up like a conquistador. It's very cute. I also got to see prints of the Shin Megami Tensei board game that is getting kickstarted soon.
That's madness.
Yep. So that was very cool looking. But yeah, overall, huge successful convention. There was so what was the article? Who was that article from Goonhammer that you linked to me, Tam?
Yeah.
So there was an article talking about like a person's perception of what the nerd community is like versus going to a convention like GenCon, and how it's kind of inescapable that it's pretty white and pretty male, like pretty like probably over 50% of the population fits that. I would say possibly over 60. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I would be surprised if the number were that low.
Yeah, same.
I was going to say, I mean, Gen Con has historically been incredibly white and male. I'm sure it's less so than it was, say, 30 years ago, but still.
Like,
I have a very
PAX, heavily lauded for being a fairly inclusive and diverse con, sits at about 50%.
Yeah, still mostly white and male.
Yeah, it's like 50 to 60. That's 50 to 60%.
Yeah, I'll say I have a kind of skewed perception because I know LARP is going to be more female oriented than most of the activities happening at Gen Con.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's because their point is interesting because this is a convention that is definitely trying to be more inclusive in a lot of ways. Like they are trying to like put out statements and trying to like make sure it feels like a safe and inclusive space. But I think the history is going to be working against it for kind of a long time because
Oh yeah, like
absolutely
between its history and its location.
Sure, it wasn't always a safe place, and people don't necessarily trust that. And like the challenge is other than shutting it all down, I don't know how you fix that, or it doesn't get fixed as quickly as possibly the culture might.
No, it's going to be a slow process.
And I do think part of the reason why online spaces feel better is because like you don't necessarily know if a person behind an avatar is white and male. You don't know what they are. There's a level of anonymity there that can be safe.
Yeah, like one of the comments on one of the sort of like premises of the article, because it's actually I found it to be a really good read, because it's the perspective of somebody who's like post transition for starters. So they're like, I am white male passing, but I wasn't always, and that's really that'll sit with you. But also, like, there's a lot of these hobbies that classically were extremely unwelcoming if you didn't fit a particular, demographic. And
I mean, and to be honest, that's still a huge problem when it comes just to game stores.
Yeah,
because they're not the most friendly, inviting places.
Yeah, absolutely.
It definitely depends on the game store, that's for sure. But
you guys have a really good one.
Well, but we have a really good one.
We have some really good ones, but we have some that are not.
Yes, like we have one locally that is the way it is because it's specifically set out to blow up the paradigm.
I was about to say, we definitely have a game store that I walked into, like, literally a foot past the threshold. Like, got stared at for like a solid 10 seconds, like, and then like, do you want anything? And then like I was like, no, I'm good. This place is not welcoming to me. I'm gonna leave.
Yeah.
Like I've got a
Yikes.
game shop that opened up like maybe a mile and a half from my house, easy walking distance, but also has like deep creeper vibes. So I've only been in there once or twice because it just does not feel like a welcoming place to be.
Ugh. Happily, the game store that opened up here after the previous one shut down and its owner decamped to Australia because he hadn't bothered to pay taxes for many years is extremely nice. Like, very open and welcoming and pleasant. Its predecessor was very, like, that previous game store was the classic in so many ways. It had the gamer funk.
And like it's hard not to see these long running cons as that writ large.
Oh yeah.
Because
and I would
they
bet a lot of
have
the people
been.
coming to the vendor room
Yeah,
run
I mean,
that kind of game store.
I'm personally very much at the point where if I see a convention that's talking about how they've been around for 20 or 30 years, I'm like, oh, I don't know that I'm interested in that.
It could be bad.
It's not like oh, this is a restaurant that's been around forever, or this is a there's other types of businesses or types of events that I'm like, oh yeah, this has been going on for so long. It is richer for that. I don't necessarily have that with conventions. I'm a lot more skeptical of ones that are, that make me think that possibly the same people are running it as were in 1995. And yeah, it's a challenge. Like, I mean, how do you make your spaces welcoming?
Well, even if you make a space welcoming, like, I think that's my thought is even if you make a space welcoming, doesn't mean like the people you are trying to make it feel welcoming for are going to come.
Well, yeah, but if you think you've made the space welcoming and people still don't trust you and don't come, then you haven't made it welcoming, I guess is my take there. And like, building trust is an active thing. You can't be like, hey, we got rid of all the gross people, come see. Like, no. Like, we have specifically partnered with these trustworthy organizations with the specific goal of adjusting our membership, and there's a certain contingent of people that are not going to like you doing that.
Yep, and in a lot of cases, some of those people are going to be the people that have
Give you
been
a lot of
coming for
money.
years and years and spending a lot of money and volunteering and yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, in reality, like, this is a multi-generational problem. Like, it is
Yeah.
going to take that long for that ship to turn. It's much easier to create a brand new con that has its own, ethics and background and history that can attract new people than to turn around an institution.
Yeah. It's hard to fix toxic culture.
I mean,
it's a lot of work.
as a sort of excellent example, I think that in the past probably 2 or 3 years, maybe slightly longer, you could say that the premier North American video game focused convention is PAX. That it had definitively usurped the crown from E3.
Oh, absolutely.
Consider how long PAX has been going on and how badly E3 has been run for so long that it's only in the last couple of years that's probably true. Like, it took what, almost 15 years, maybe more than 15 years for PAX to actually, pick up.
And even at that, that's an interesting example because PAX started off with a lot of steam behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like PAX was an internet zeitgeist powerhouse partnering with several other internet zeitgeist powerhouses, specifically in opposition to E3. And like, it still took a while for it to kind of be the central thing. And PAX has its own issues. It's certainly managed to be more welcoming than it's the thing it was replacing. But like, turns out that wasn't hard with E3.
No.
But I've also had the conversation with people that are like, I mean, my entire job, it's like, oh, my entire job is writing, tabletop RPGs and LARP content and board games, but you wouldn't catch me dead going on a flight to Gen Con. And that's an interesting like problem to have to solve. Sort of wonder what would happen if you have Gen Con. Like, what if Gen Con shows up in trying to think of big convention centers on the coasts.
I mean, I kind of think the biggest problem that Gen Con has is just the fact that it's the house that TSR built. Like, it is a thing birthed essentially out of a fairly narrow focus.
It's
that has
the
tried
D&D
to
convention.
expand, but has struggled to expand past that original vision.
Well, I mean, I would say, interesting, because I feel like even in the original vision, it was always like a tabletop RPG con, right? Whereas now it's
Growing up, it was the D&D convention.
It was absolutely the D&D convention.
And it's definitely not the D&D convention anymore. It is beyond that vision. D&D is a relatively small player at this convention.
But to what degree is that still the image that people have of it?
Right. Like, I still think of it as, Lake Geneva convention?
Mm-hmm. In my brain, it's still the D&D convention. I know that's not, accurate anymore, but...
That's kind of what I mean when I was talking about outreach and, specifically advertising and reaching out to other groups to be like, hey, no, we've made this space and it used to be this thing, but we are different now.
Well, Origins originally was the convention for things other than D&D.
Yeah.
Yes. Now Origins is just Gen Con small. It really is. They're very similar conventions.
I mean, imagine if, 10 years from now, BlizzCon was trying to be E3. That's the scenario that we have with Gen Con. And, I'm old. I'm an internet old. I remember when White Dwarf was just a magazine for D&D.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is my 17th. I've been going to Gen Con for 17 years. And the first Gen Con I went to, my primary activity was playing in Pathfinder, Living Pathfinder games. This is not to say, Dungeons and Dragons was going through a thing at my first Gen Con, because that was when 4th Ed was coming out.
I was going to say, they're going through a thing now, too.
Yeah, so Dungeons and Dragons at conventions has really not been a primary player in 17 years.
I mean, it doesn't help that do they even have a living campaign anymore?
I believe
for 5e, there's Adventurers League, but no.
Okay.
That's not the same.
Yeah, not really. Not that you would feel the need to go to a convention for.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the thing, I think, is that, I mean, it's part of the reason that I'm, as somebody who's primarily interested in tabletop RPGs, there's not a lot of appeal to me for some of these conventions, because I'm not that excited about the idea of going and playing a weekender with people I don't know.
Whereas, I feel like with board games and video games, it's much easier to sample the wares.
Oh, I disagree. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I go to PAX and I don't play games.
Those lines are intense at PAX.
That's true.
Not that I've been to PAX in ages, but for me, I always went and played with the indie games, the small games.
That's still the way to go.
Yeah.
Those lines are also kind of intense.
For some of them, yes, but most of them you could just play the game and it's
right. And the person who built it was super happy to talk to you about it, and that was a delightful experience.
Yeah, that is still a thing.
Most of the games at Gen Con, you can just walk up to the booth and they will at least try either explain it or possibly give you a demo of the game. So there's definitely a lot of sampling of wares happening.
Yeah. Well, and I do think it's cool to I think that they go and see new stuff and have a taster of things that you otherwise have a hard time getting a taster of. Is I think that's the main draw of that sort of thing. But it's not it's not like the old days where you would go to a convention because that's where you would get to play the secret module that nobody else gets to play. Because that's what it used to be.
Yep.
There are still people doing that.
Yeah, but it's not like I'm not
not
exactly starved for
Well,
content there.
Yeah, it depends if you're really into like the Pathfinder Society, because the Pathfinder Society does run like special events where it's like, this is the big plot moving event that we're all going to be going in and doing.
Sure, and like for a while, Skittershot was a convention exclusive too.
Yeah.
But it didn't take that long before that wasn't true.
True.
Back before they killed it and replaced it, and then killed and replaced that, and then killed and replaced that, D&D had Living City, which very much was the same thing, and was a lot of when I went to conventions, what I went for.
I am pretty sure Living City was run by what is now Paizo.
Yes, Paizo did end up, yes. And well, I forget order of operations. Paizo just definitely ended up running some of the living stuff, yeah. I don't remember if they took over before or after Living City got killed off. I kind of think it was still under the RPGA when it got killed off.
I think for me, back in the day, growing up in a very small area, a lot of going to conventions was just seeing what was out there. Because, like, in the pre-internet era, it was kind of hard to find new stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I mean, there are more things that I want to play than I have time for.
It is nice. I will say, another nice thing about these conventions is it's where a lot of like the people who are making your games are like showing up and willing to and wanting to talk about the games that they make and excite. Like, it was really fun getting to talk to the folks behind Level 99 and talk about like how much I love Argent and the various games built in that world. And there was a guy there who was just so excited to talk about Bullet with me. Apparently there's just one guy, Bullet is his passion project, and like one of their key arts was from a new Bullet game coming out, and he was just so jazzed that I have played it and had fun with it.
Tam, we've done it again. We've recorded a show, and we've not gotten to the Age of Sigmar topic. I'm sorry.
I feel like we can at least get a tiny piece of that topic.
Yeah.
In particular, how annoyed I am at how they released Skaven.
It does seem like
because holy shit.
There's a lot to unpack with this whole thing.
The actual rules of the game seem pretty good. Seems like a good addition. The way they handled the start of the new edition, absolute garbage. Completely terrible.
It's like like I said, there's just so much to unpack, from unbelievable unforced errors, like just truly clown shoes nonsense. I mean, the specific thing Ash is talking about is like 6 to 8 months ago, they announced that a bunch of boxes were leaving the range. They were going to be culling some subset of miniatures, which is never a fun time for anybody. So
this subset of miniatures was basically all of the Skaven, all of the Caster Stormcast, all of Beasts of Chaos, all of the Bone Chewer Orcs, the less popular ones, honestly.
Yeah, the like less popular borderline racist ones.
Yes, those. And a variety of other minis.
Yeah. And they try not to do this very often because it's bad feels. Like, hey, these minis that you might own are no longer useful in this game for reasons that hopefully are important for game health, and like if you're hopefully are not some other stupid reason.
But like the Stormcast they cut were not the oldest Stormcast, but instead the second oldest Stormcast, the ones that they launched AOS 2.0 with. And the Skaven they cut was 80% of the range.
Yes.
That's disturbing given how big of a following Skaven have.
They announced that 16 units were getting removed. 16 kits were being removed.
Yes.
Which is more than 16 units. Because you can make certain kits into multiple units.
Yeah.
And the actual, like, when all is said and done,
Like, we now have the final list of what's actually getting removed.
actually, like, permanently removed from the game. And it's what, 4?
It's 4 things.
It's 4 units, two of which were really awkward pack-ins into other kits, and one of which was only ever available in one starter box 10 years ago. Like, lead with that.
Please start with this one. Like,
Because if you had said, hey,
you said, hey, we're not going to sell these metal minis. We have new plastic ones coming along later this year, which is a thing that they're doing.
yes,
I wouldn't have been so upset.
they literally announced that multiple beloved core kits were leaving the range and have at this point announced new sculpts for almost every single one of them.
Yeah, but if they had done the same thing, they wouldn't have invoked a run on the stores for
No,
people to snap these things up.
No one was doing a run on the stores for these things that were going to become useless.
Yeah, like that's the thing is they not only they
killed their sales.
They totally
And
destroyed
made
their
people
sales.
mad.
And yeah, exactly. It's like just baffling. Like, not only do you have a bunch of people miss out, like, just nope, you don't get to have this anymore. So why buy it? Because like the internet scuttlebutt for the game is like, don't bother buying anything for a while. Decide after they announce everything. So it's like, okay, cool. You just hamstrung your sales for 6 months. Their new starter box is Skaven. Like, one of the 2 factions is Skaven. And there's people who are like, I don't know that I'm going to pick that up because I don't know what they've done to my faction. Everything looks terrible. Turns out it was mostly fine. Just 6 months of uncertainty and doubt and rage. It's dumb. It's just.
So yeah, that's my gripe about AOS 4.0. The game itself, the game rules, the new army creation rules, excellent. We can talk about those later. I'm frustrated.
No,
it was a stupid start.
Yes, the start is just so frustratingly dumb.
Every time I start to think that Games Workshop has like learned some things, they do something like this.
To be fair, I am partially invested in 3 factions, and they cut all of one. It looked like they cut most of a second. The one they cut has gotten no love since AOS came out, Beasts of Chaos, and that was foreseeable but unfortunate.
Yeah.
They, however, want to keep it going in their old Worlds game, a game which I do not think has any success based on what I can see on store shelves. But well, no, maybe it will. Who knows? Stop laughing.
I have the same uncharitable opinion about Warhammer: The Old World as I do about Pathfinder 1.
Look, the company making Pathfinder 1 is no longer supporting Pathfinder 1. Not really. I guess they will still sell you PDFs because there's no reason not to, but they've moved on.
The core problem, really. No, with the limited time we have left in the show, rather than cracking open that particular egg, what I actually want to talk about is thank goodness you're here.
What is thank goodness you're here?
So you remember Untitled Goose Game?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
What if you made that stunningly more British and like
less goosey?
You're not a goose, but it's very like the game asks you if you would like it in the local, like hyper specific British language, or if you want translations into English. It's so bizarre, and it's such a delightful little snapshot of, I guess, small town England. I mean, I don't know enough about it, but it's made by a bunch of devs in small town England, so I assume that they know a thing or two.
Makes sense.
It's a lot like playing Scary Go Round, like the webcomic. Like if that were a video game, it's got a lot of similar energy.
All right, I think you just sold me.
It's not the same art, but it's got the same
Sure.
vibe. And the art is like, was it Dr. Katz Celebrity Therapist?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
It's like that. Okay.
Yeah, like it's not quite as like Squiggle Vision as that, but it's got that kind of feel to it. It is so very weird, and it is making fun of England in a way that can only be accomplished by somebody deeply like who is absolutely quintessentially British. It's such a delightful little game. It's also published by the same people who published Untitled Goose Game, like different studio, same publisher. But you're just solving weird little puzzles and having weird little interactions with people and having like I don't know, having a deadpan expression through like extremely weird kind of terrible things happening to you. You're like a little lemon-headed guy in a suit sent to this town for some reason to help out, I guess. It's so bizarre and just it's so weird, and yet I can't stop playing with it and messing with it because I'm like, what? Like, what weird thing is going to happen next?
All right, I'm gonna have to check this out.
It's also, as far as I can tell, is relatively short, and it was on sale last. I don't know if it still is, but it was on sale when I last looked.
And also, I've now realized that I desperately want a point-and-click adventure game set in Tackleford, and John Allison should get on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is about as close as you're going to get at present. I want more. I want more little games like this that are simultaneously these like super zoomed in, like views and like jokes about a particular place made by people from that place in a way that's like interesting here. Like I bet there are so many like parts of the US that you could do this where you just zoom way in on like some particular largely unknown but super characterful like portion of a town. And just like lean into authentic accents and the kinds of weird things that happen there and so forth.
I mean, you could do a video game about the extremely important world of the Calf Fry Festival.
I'm here for it. It's like I love it because I love. Thanks goodness you're here, because it feels like it's like we love this place that we're from, and we also understand that it's weird and we laugh about it, and you should laugh about it with us, but also you should love it too because we also love it. And like that's such a cool take that I don't feel like I see enough of.
I mean, the thing that I keep thinking about as you describe this is a little bit less loving, but it sounds kind of like Lost in or Night in the Woods.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, like this is like yes, Night in the Woods is is in that same vibe, but like Night in the Woods, it has funny moments, but it is not funny.
Well, it's an elder horror game.
Yeah. Like there's that like Night in the Woods is like this place is not a good place. And you can sort of unpack the ways in which it's not a good place, even if it's a familiar one. Whereas like this is very much like, yeah, it's weird. And yeah, there's problems, but like there's reasons to love it too. And I kind of like that. Yeah, this is like a happy Night in the Woods. I mostly came to it because I was reading about the tribulations involved in getting voice actors, because the accent is both turbo specific and not easily mimicable.
Oh.
So they had a fairly small population to pick from.
Yes, like their friends and family. They were like, there was just an interesting thing I was reading. It was like, yeah, it turned out it was like 3 people who we knew personally from school days, and like this like one well-known like British actor who happened to be from near here and could get it right. And so it was just like, I think like, yeah, we were having like trouble in the recording thing because like this dude's famous and these dudes are like some people we knew from grade school. And we'd be like, okay, you're all going to act together. And they're like, what? And it just, I don't know. It added to the vibe for me. I'm currently very into like games with joy.
Joy is good.
Yeah.
I think the highlight of my otherwise awful week was I beat a T-17
Yay!
Nice.
Yay!
It turns out if you spend enough chaos re-rolling them, you can eventually get modifiers that aren't just absolutely toxic.
I at least now see what my end game path is going to be and what I need to get there.
And what do you need to get? Is it Arislotha's belt?
No, none of the builds I'm kind of trying to ape are using that. So I need to.
That's big for slam builds and bleed builds. And this is not the same sort of slam build that I think Kodra's going for.
No, I'm going for. I am going all in, and it seems most people who are doing this are also going all in, which I like.
Are you doing one-hander and shield, or are you doing two-hander?
Neither.
Dual wield, baby.
See, okay, I like that is definitely a thing, but I have to say the going fully block and recoup life on block is an insane defensive layer.
Let me pitch you on
So is
this.
having 10 endurance charges.
Let me pitch you on this. Dual wield Nebulock.
Okay, I can see that.
And having
That's the thing you've wanted to make happen for a while, though.
Yes, it is.
It's kind of like the dumb thing I did this week was I built a Widow Hail elemental hit of the Spectrum build, and turns out if you get just the right kind of quiver with triple elemental on it, like it's as powerful as having like a 1200 DPS LE bow.
There are 10 people above 90, or at least there's a decent number of people above 90 that are dual wield Nebulock, and they mostly sort of all surrounded on the same thing, which is getting Echoes of Creation and Blunderbore.
Really?
Yes.
That one surprises me.
And then also the gym that says "Do not care about item requirements."
Okay, that makes more sense now.
I forget what that's called. Glorious Vanity?
No. Elegant Hubris.
Elegant Hubris. Okay, yeah. Glorious Vanity is the one that you can get like the
Got all the Val Keystones on it.
Oh,
yeah, the
and then
Keystones.
Other thing I need to stress that this build is doing is auto-exerting 4 different shouts because we're using Echoes of Creation, and then getting a Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh to allocate Warbringer.
Yeah.
The thing that I kind of want to build is a Svalin build, the shield that came in this league that basically every time you block, you cast a spell. I'm sure there's a fun build to be had around that.
Anyways, I can confirm that I like how Consecrated Path of Endurance feels, so I'm gonna just enjoy doing this thing.
So that's just your main attack at this point.
Yeah.
Like Flicker Strike, but not on a right side class.
Yeah. That's been my problem with the Widow Hail build is I've spent so much time on the left side of the tree that I don't really know how to make the right side of the tree not feel like crap. It is super squishy. I am not the biggest fan of super squishy. I feel like evasion maybe with some ward, since ward is super easy to get all of a sudden. Anyway.
Except for the damage over time thing being a problem. Seems like it could be reasonable.
Yeah. Anyway, we have very much recorded a show at this point. And once again, the topics get bumped.
We'll talk about Age of Sigmar 4 properly eventually.
Yep. Hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Have a good one.
Good night.
Good night.